I am the Movie Maestro. Welcome to another film review. During the 1940s there was a certain uprising in the craving for films with a darker mood and a darker attitude, but with a sense of likability still in there. And that's where this film comes along, The Third Man, directed by Carol Reed. The film was released in 1949, starring Joseph Cotten, Lida Vallee, and Orson Welles. Joseph Cotten plays Holly Martins, an out-of-work pulp novelist who has traveled to Vienna, then divided into 4 separate quadrants, because of a job offered to him by an old friend named Harry Lime, played by Orson Welles. However, he arrives there to find out that Lime mysteriously died in a traffic accident of sorts. However, as time passes by, he realizes that it was a setup, and eventually he goes on a quest to try and solve the mystery regarding where his friend is gone. The story is very simple and very basic, and yet there's a surprisingly effective amount of suspense and atmosphere brought to life very well in this particular film. It has pretty much all the qualities of what makes a good film noir, and yet there are some interesting little touches here and there that make it stand out. Easily the best thing about this film is the cinematography and the atmosphere, like most films of its genre, especially for its time. The shadows are excellent, it plays with the imagination in numerous effective points, even though there's not exactly a lot of violence, yet a lot of mystery. And the atmosphere is almost palpable in places. Also, the sets are very well designed, and the characters, if not that memorable by film noir standards in comparison to most others, still have enough likability to make them rootable, or non-rootable as the case may be. And of course there's the femme fatale, who ends up being rather unconventional. Probably the best performer in this film, however, is Orson Welles as Harry Lime. Even though he's not in the film very much, and yet a lot comes across about his very bizarre viewpoints of the world. And it's pretty shocking considering the time period that it came about. The suspense present in this film is actually quite incredible, especially considering how high the stakes feel by the end when Lime is finally getting a chance to be cornered. Also, the ending is very, very empty. Probably one of the emptiest endings that I personally have experienced upon watching a film. Very dark, very slow, very somber, and all it is just the simple image of a repetition of an earlier scene towards the beginning of the film. Really nothing in particular happens that seems significant, and yet a lot is said about how it's a very empty ending. Very typical in the film noir genre. It's also surprising how really furious the chase towards the end feels. The climax is very intense, and it's surprising how effective it is considering as there's no music and there's not too much action going on in that scene, and yet by the time it's done, it's hard not to feel kind of that empty feeling that usually happens when one feels the satisfaction of having achieved their goal. In that way, this is one of the more depressing film noirs out there. I'll confess, though, I wasn't 100% crazy about this film. Maybe it's just because the characters could have been a little more interesting than they were, because they were rather basic. But at the same time, they did have enough character traits that made them interesting enough by general film character standards, though rather simple in film noir standards. The one thing that almost would have gotten a negative criticism from me, I'll admit, was the music by Alex Karras. The zither music is so immensely optimistic that if it weren't for the fact that it thankfully does know when to be quiet during the more serious moments, it might have turned out a little insufferable. I mean, at first it's enjoyable and it's certainly catchy, but it feels like there could have been something a little more to it. But hey, maybe that's just me. Overall, The Third Man is a great example of its genre. Anybody who is interested in classic film noir should definitely give this film a watch. It's interesting enough to keep the audience invested, and even though it's not what I call one of my personal favorites even for that genre, it's definitely worth checking out every now and then. The characters, though basic, have a little bit of intrigue in there. The stakes are surprisingly high, and it has probably one of the best climaxes and conclusions that you'll find in the genre, and I think that's enough to warrant seeing it every now and then, parsing it, if the need arises. On the worth meter, I'd give it a worth renting, and I give this 3.5 out of 5 on the star rating. Thank you for your time.